Let's have a look at this equation a little closer and see how it affects the way people buy. We did some research in a book called Rethinking the Sales Force that I wrote with McKinsey, as it happens. And we looked at the three ways in which customers buy value. There were three distinct types. There is what we called intrinsic value buyers. They're buying on the cost side of the equation. As far as they're concerned, if you're 2 cents cheaper, you've got the business. They're very, very cost focused. They don't want to see salespeople. You say, can we come along and talk to you? And they say, nope, just email us a proposal. What are your prices? But then there's the extrinsic value buyers. You can see I did this with McKinsey. Intrinsic, extrinsic, I haven't a clue what they mean. But they're nice long words, you know. But I'll rename them in a moment and make them more intelligible. The extrinsic value buyer was buying on the benefits side. They'd say, we've got a problem, can you help us? They want help and advice. And they'll pay you a good margin for it. And there was a third type of buyer, which I'm not going to talk of much more here, called the strategic value buyer, who was basically buying a relationship between organizations, which often extended across the whole business chain. It was fairly complex. So the intrinsic value customer, just to summarize them, they understand the product, they're cost-focused, and they don't want to spend time with you. They know the answer before they talk to you. The extrinsic value customer doesn't know the answer. All they know is they have a problem. They're looking for advice, they're looking for help, they want to spend time with you. In fact, if you can't spend enough time with them, they'd rather go to a competitor who can. So they need a lot of hand-holding, but the margins are good. And then finally, the strategic value customer is the one who gets into a fairly deep partnering type relationship. Now, here's the crucial step. If you're going to succeed in selling, you have to configure your whole business model and your whole sales force around the type of value you can create for the customer. If you primarily, in your marketplace, got a lot of intrinsic customers who buy on price, you've got to have a model which we call a transactional model that's got a fairly low cost of sale. You can't employ very expensive people and a lot of support because it's not having any impact on how the customer makes a decision. The customer would rather you were a bit cheaper. And a competitor who's a bit cheaper than you will eat your lunch. So if you're trying to sell to the intrinsic customer, your salespeople can't create much extra value because they already know the answer. They already know what they want. So you have to have a low-cost model. However, for the extrinsic customer, the salesperson is usually creating more value than the product because it's the salesperson who helps solve the problem and uses the products just as tools. So you can create a lot of value, and that means you can afford to have a higher cost of sale model. You have more talented salespeople, you give them more support, you let them spend more time with the customer. All of this pushes up the cost of consultative selling, but because you create more value, you get back a sufficient margin to make a good living out of it. And finally, the strategic value customer is a very, very costly thing, what we'll call an enterprise model, and I'm not going to go very much into that this morning because we have so much to cover, but there's some very clear rules about how to do that. Now, if I just summarize the three, for the transactional model, we create value by making it easy and cheap. For the consultative model, it's the advice that creates the value. For the enterprise, it's a partnering type relationship. Bear those in mind.